All right, so I'm going to answer some questions from the comment section. Okay, number one, isn't it easier to draw and sketch with charcoal? All right, so you guys probably know that I do my preliminary sketching with burnt sienna. I just thin the paint with odorless mineral spirits and I do my sketch. When I first started painting, I did experiment with doing my initial sketch using vine charcoal, which is a very soft charcoal. And if you were to sketch on a canvas with vine charcoal, it's very easy to kind of dust that off with a rag and completely erase it. I did that for a little while, but to be honest with you, I was painting a lot. I was doing a lot of plein air painting or painting on location, and it just was a hassle to have to bring an extra thing. You know, I know it doesn't seem like a lot, but for me, it was just easier to set up my paints and just use the paint to do the sketch. Also, what I found is that I really like having little bits of the drawing show through in the finished painting. That's why I sketch with burnt sienna. If you're doing landscapes, typically there's a lot of blues and greens out there. By doing your sketch in burnt sienna, you will have little pops of that orange color coming through, which is a nice complement to the other colors in the landscape. So those are the reasons I do it. I like to have those pops of color, and I also just like to get right into the painting process. So that just works for me personally, but certainly vine charcoal is something that works, and you can experiment and see if it's good for you. All right, question number two. Since you've been spending time on the waves, surfing, has it changed how you paint waves? To be honest, I haven't really actually painted. I've been surfing now for 2 months, and I haven't done a lot of plein air work because I've been in the studio, so I haven't actually painted waves since I started surfing 2 months ago. But I don't know that it would change the way I paint them. I guess we'll have to wait and see, but I think that when I'm looking at waves for surfing and when I'm looking at waves for painting, I'm looking at them differently. So when I'm looking at waves for surfing, I'm looking at the shape of it, where it's gonna peak, where I think it's gonna break, and how it's going to break, and then trying to get into that spot, into the takeoff spot, as they call it. And then when I'm looking at waves to paint them, I'm looking for colors and maybe interesting shapes, like more random shapes. It's funny, like with surfing, you want a more uniform shaped wave, but for painting, I think having more irregular shapes is more interesting. But again, we'll see. I mean, I'm definitely looking at waves more carefully and looking at them in a way that I never did before. So I would think that it's probably going to somehow affect the final product. And, you know, I'll definitely check back with you guys once I get back out doing some more plein air painting and see if it has affected things or the way I paint them. So good question. Let's see, number three, this is a question I get a lot, but I'll answer it again, is how does an artist go about finding their style? I think there's two ways really. Number one is just by painting a lot. Your style is going to evolve naturally. The other thing that I think really helps to develop style, or, you know, refine your style, is to look at a lot of paintings. And I think that that's equally as important. I mean, I think there's, you know, it's a combination of doing a lot of painting yourself, evaluating your own work, but then also looking at as much work as possible, as many paintings as possible. I think your style is also going to be something that sort of emerges when you stop imitating. I think imitation is an important part of the learning process. And if I look back at my early work, I can see the influences. There were people that inspired me, and I really was trying to emulate what they were doing. But at a certain point, when I started selling paintings and was showing in galleries, it became very important to me to really find my own voice. And so any painting that I thought ended up looking too much like another artist would not see the light of day, or I wouldn't bring it to a gallery, or I wouldn't show it. But yeah, like I said, I think it's something that's going to evolve naturally just by, you know, doing a lot of paintings and looking at a lot of paintings. So it's not something you can really force. Okay, so now a couple technical questions. One is how I went about mounting my camera on my surfboard. So as you guys know, I have a GoPro mounted to the front of my surfboard, and it was kind of a problem. I was worried about, you can use these adhesive mounts that have like apparently a really strong adhesive, but I thought, all right, this thing's gonna be in the ocean. If the camera falls off, then I'll lose the camera. So I ended up, I talked to a friend who also has one mounted, and he bought some special hardware where the mount was screwed. There was like a screw running through the surfboard. So I went to Lowe's and I found this nylon, 2-inch nylon, 1/4-inch screw, and it threads right into the camera mount. So I just drilled a hole through my board and then put the screw through it. And as you can see, the screw and the mount are big enough that when it's tight, it covers the hole that I drilled through the board, so no water seems to be leaking through. Good to go. So far, it's been great. And then the final question here, how do I go about attaching my paintings to my frames? As you guys know, I make my own floater frames, and I paint both on panels and stretched canvas. If I'm mounting a panel into the frame, then I use 3M mounting tape. I think Scotch also makes this mounting tape too. It's a 2-sided tape, very strong. So I don't go all the way around with the tape. I just put little, like 1-inch segments around, so that if I want to remove the panel, then it's not terribly difficult to do. If you were to tape all the way around, good luck getting the panel out. So, and then if I'm using stretched canvas, then the frame will be deeper, obviously, because the stretched canvas is 3/4 inch as opposed to an 1/8 inch thick. So I will make a deeper frame. The painting sits in there. I will drill holes and then use panhead screws to screw into the stretcher bars of the canvas. And that's how I mount my paintings. And for those of you who don't know what floater frames are, floater frame is where the painting seems to float inside of the frame. There's like a gap around it, so none of the painting is actually covered by frame. Your typical frame will cover the edge, even up to like 1/4 inch, which to me was it's kind of hard, because you have to anticipate composition wise, that you're going to lose like 1/4 inch of the painting. So I like having a floater where none of the painting is actually covered up, and also I like the look of it. It's very clean and contemporary, and that was kind of an important thing for me. I wanted that kind of look. And then the other thing, and I'll talk about this in a future video, this is not really a question, but I've had a lot of people ask about how I go about simplifying. And I talked about in the video with Pete, I kind of touched on that a little bit. And when I've got this show, I'm working on a show that's going to be opening October 10th at Studio Gallery in San Francisco. There'll be more info about that. A lot of paintings, I'd say like 35, 40, 45, who knows at this point, but a lot of paintings in that show. And so I'm working on that. But after that show is delivered, this winter and fall, I'll be able to kind of get more into explaining some of this stuff anyhow. But the one thing I'd say is that as far as simplifying goes, there's a couple ways of viewing a painting. Some people will view a painting as like a scene. They'll see a pretty scene and they're like, oh, I want to paint that. For me, I look for a strong pattern of shapes. For me, painting a scene can be really, really difficult because I don't find there is no sort of graphic structure, so to speak, for me to kind of work with. Now, so I can use this one as an example. The way I go about painting like something like this, even though the birds may seem somewhat complicated, they really aren't when you break them down into simple shapes of color. The two obvious big shapes of color would be the blue of the water here, the reflected sky, and then maybe the negative space around the birds. That's another shape. And then within the within each bird, I just broke these down into simple shapes as well. You know, the black shape for their neck, and then the most detailed part was getting the beaks and the face and whatever, but most everything else is just broken down into simple shapes. And so what I look for is a pleasing pattern of simple shapes, you know, and that's my composition. And something like this, which is a fairly small painting, I think it's a 10 by 10, when you have that strong graphic structure, you can have a painting, there's paintings I've done that are like 6 by 6s, and you can see clearly what it is, like across the room. So I tend to like paintings that have visual impact, so I don't tend to paint scenes, so to speak. I do like to paint, like strong patterns of light and dark, or just strong shape structures, if that makes sense. So anyway, I'll get more into that in a future video, but that's kind of how I approach it. Another way to think about how you approach painting is think of it as like a mosaic. In other words, patches or shapes of color are being used to construct an image, as opposed to with drawing, where you're just drawing lines and, you know, obviously you're going to have light and dark, you're going to be shading and that sort of thing. But with painting, I think it can be a really good exercise to take a scene or a subject and experiment with really breaking it down into the simplest graphic terms, just like painting it like a mosaic. Like I said, we'll do more of that in the future, just to kind of give a clear idea of what I'm talking about. But anyway, so yeah, just wanted to touch base with you guys and answer some of the recent questions. I am pretty busy with the show and stuff, but I can always sit down and do, you know, answer some questions. So if you guys have more questions, put them in the comments below. And as usual, thanks for hanging out, guys. I will see you in the next video.